Good afternoon, ECG 692, Action Research and Counseling students. I hope you had a good Labor Day. I certainly had a good Labor Day. I worked all weekend tearing out a tile shower in our house and getting ready to renovate that. I ate plenty. I hope you had a good time too. But it's back to work today. I want to mention about 3 things for you in this brief webinar. Number 1, some of you in ECG 692 Part 2 are working together as a part of a special cohort group. A few of you may be in the same school and working on the same problem or the same school improvement. I want to ask you to send an email to me, and this goes to everyone in the class. Send an email to me, number 1, indicating if you are working alone in your school with your project, or if you're working as a part of a group or a couple, and if so, let me know who your partner is. Send an email as soon as possible with that information. Either number 1, you're working alone in your school setting, or number 2, you're working with someone or within a group in your school setting. Number 2, it has come to my attention that some of you, obviously, are friends with people who are in the instructional leadership or teacher leader programs, and their requirements for this course are different than the requirements for counselor education. Those who are in counselor education, such as yourself, are to not only make a presentation at the conclusion of the course, that is on November 12th or 13th, but you also must submit the 5-chapter written paper complete with references and all the appropriate information there. Some of the others may not have to submit a paper. They have to do a presentation. You must submit the paper and proof of your submission for publication of that paper. All right, I just wanted to clear that up. Number 3, it's important for you to pay close attention to your own timeline for the course. As I said last week, you have about 8 weeks to complete the entire data collection process and implementation of your project as far as you can go with that. Some of you will be able to complete the whole project. Others of you will only be able to implement parts or get a couple of months implementation, but you will not be able to accumulate final data. When you write your paper, in that case, you will only give the data that you have, talk about what you're going to do as you discuss it, talk about what you're going to do in continuing the project until you come to a conclusion. Others of you may complete your project, and so your data collection and data analysis will be complete. So I want to remind you of that. You're going to be responsible for all 5 chapters. In this section, 692, Part 2, you're doing chapters 4 and 5, which is your results of your implementation or your data collection, and chapter 5 are the implications or discussion of such. Follow chapters 11 and 12 in Perzak's Writing Empirical Research Reports for a wonderful guide on what to include in chapters 4 and 5 of your study. Thirdly, I want to remind you that you should contact me if you have questions at any time. If you run up on an obstacle or you don't know the answer to something, or how you should say something in your paper, or how to deal with some kind of extraneous variable that has cropped up in your study, send me an email or call me, and I'll be glad to answer those kinds of things. This is common in the problem-solving world and common in the research world, that things that are unforeseen crop up, and you have to deal with those things or account for them in some particular way. So I hope you will feel free to do that. From your syllabus, I wanted to emphasize a couple of things. That, number 1, be thinking about your presentation. You're going to be responsible for about a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation on all of the aspects of your research. I'm going to do a video later on talking about the specific appearance of those PowerPoint slides and what to do and what not to do in your presentation. But at this point, you could probably go ahead and begin to summarize chapters 1 and 2 and 3, which you've already completed, in a PowerPoint and get ready to add the final slides for chapters 4 and 5. And just to keep that in mind, that's going to be a major component of what you're doing in your PowerPoint presentation at the end of the class. As you're reading and writing and rereading your own work, make sure you read it with a good ear or eye toward understanding, communication, clarity. If you don't understand what you have written, I guarantee you that neither I nor any other reader will be able to understand what you've written. So make sure you proofread, make sure it makes sense to you, and if it does not make sense to you, I guarantee you it won't make sense to a third reader. Sometimes even when things make sense to you, it may not make sense to someone else. For example, the use of acronyms is often very troublesome. Acronyms have to be identified, spelled out completely within the body of a paper when you first use that acronym. Then you can use the acronym going forward. But do not assume that anyone knows what an acronym stands for. Not ACT, not ALSDE, not DCSS, or anything else like that. Make sure that you spell out those acronyms. That's an example of how you may even read your paper and it may be understandable to you and make sense to you, but someone else, the uninformed, may not be able to understand what you're saying. When you get your data and start collecting data and deciding on how you're going to analyze that, I will give some pointers to you in general in a couple of weeks about that. But you may want to talk to me individually about your data set. Your data is going to be different. It's going to vary from person to person. And so you may want to talk to me personally about what kind of analysis that you want to give or lend to your data set. We will not have a call-in session as a group this week. Our next call-in session as a group is going to be actually 2 weeks from now on September the 17th, if all goes well. I know I will be out of town on that particular day, but at 9 p.m. on that Tuesday night, 2 weeks from tonight, I will have sent you a Skype invitation through your GEM account, your JSU email, and I hope you will be able to log in that particular time. One or two of you had difficulty logging in and getting that ahead of time. I will put that up and then give you an invitation so you can go ahead and practice logging in and make sure everything's working right before the 9 o'clock hour Central Time on September the 17th. Until that time, I'm going to be available to you for questions, comments, email back and forth exchange. You can certainly call me. As I've said, my cell phone number is 256-572-9919, 256-572-9919. I would tell you not to share that with anybody, but I think everybody from Michigan to India has that number anyway. So I feel free to call me. If I don't answer, it'll be because I don't recognize your number first. You can leave me a message, and I'll be glad to call you back. Or you can text a message to me at that number. So I hope you're all doing well and fired up about completing this particular action research project. Remember this. You are in an educational specialist program. The very term educational specialist implies that you are a problem solver. You're able to identify a problem, a need, an improvement that must be made. You're able to gather a group of stakeholders and gain consensus and be able to get a direction that will be approved. You may be able to gain funding for those things that are necessary. But an educational specialist is able to solve problems and address issues in a school or a system that may be outstanding issues that must be addressed. Those things that we have to address are sometimes mandates that come from the federal government or from the state or from our county or local system. Sometimes they're just things that we see that need to be improved in the system. Sometimes there are issues that the superintendent or principal has not had time to address, and you have the opportunity now to address those. You are an educational specialist. Take that seriously. Be a leader in your school. Be a problem solver, and you'll have a great experience with this course and be able to apply this model many times in the future, I'm sure. Well, that's all I have for 10 minutes this time, and I hope you have a wonderful week, and be sure to contact me if you have any need whatsoever.